Hello YouTube, this is Sam Gerrans from Qur'anite.com. Today is Monday the 29th of June 2020, and over this period while I'm finishing up editing, proofing and this sort of endless colossal amount of work, I'm going to leave this perennial subject of COVID-19 and the propaganda rollout. I think we're all tired of that, and I think most of us know why it's happening, where it's going. So I'm going to just over this period, I think I'm going to take pieces, portions of the Qur'an, and just that I think really relate to this time. I mean, they all relate to all times, but that we can apply in this time, and just sort of give my exposition of them. And today, what I'd like to do is something I might have looked at before, but perhaps not in the same way. And it's Surah 52, and I'm going to look at verses 30 through to pretty much through to the end. Now, there's a concept in the Qur'an which I call the hanging am. Now, if you look at the traditionalist translations of this word am, which usually means or, as in would you like tea or coffee, quite often it performs that role of just or. But there are a number, quite a high number, 30, 40, something like that, of hanging ams, which is the word or, which if you wanted to translate it into English is just like or coffee. Well, this doesn't really make any sense, and the traditionalist translators know this, because if you look at their translations, they interpolate, they add words to try to make it mean something. But as part of my process, I went through all of these and put them all together and looked at them and realized that they're actually performing a different function. They're actually they're providing an argument and then giving the answer. And that's how I treat it in my translation, and they're all dealt with in the notes. I'm not trying to sell anything to you. You can download my work for free from Qur'anite.com, and that's going to remain the case as long as this project continues. So just take it for free and have a look at it. So, but anyway, to get to the point, I'm using the current edition. So this is 52, and it's verse 30. Now this is the am statement. If they say a poet, we will wait for him for a time. Now this is an argument. If this is what they come and say, if they say you, Muhammad, the recipient of the Qur'an, you're a poet, we'll wait for you. We'll see what, we'll just hang out here. We'll just, we'll wait and see what happens to you. Then comes the answer. You see, it's an FAQ system. Say thou, so wait. I am with you among those waiting. So, I mean, a lot of people say this, Muhammad was a poet. Well, if that's the case, and that's the argument, well, then you wait and we'll wait. That's the argument. That's the response. Because we're all going to die, we're all going to God, and then we'll see. The next am statement, or hanging am. If their reason commands them this is verse 32. And this is again an argument. You see, well, we'd like to agree with you see, but, well, our reason doesn't allow us to do it. It's, it's because we're so reasonable, because we're so thorough. I mean, you get this from those who call themselves Muslims. You get this from people who say that they're not. It's a form of saying, well, I suppose it's a form of patronizing, isn't it? It's patronizing you. Our reason doesn't allow us this. If this is what they're saying, you see, this is another am statement. If you look in your favorite traditionalist translation, you will find a lot of parentheses, because he has to, because he didn't really understand what's going on here. And these are found across the Qur'an. If you compile them, put them all together, you realize that you have the answers to pretty much any question you're ever going to get asked. So if this is what they say, it's our reason. This is the reason why we don't accept it. It's because it's our logic. Logic doesn't allow us to do it. And as I say, you get this quite a lot from the so-called traditionalists, and maybe not in terms of rhetoric, but certainly in terms of execution, because in effect they are following, to a very large extent, a completely different narrative. So they're saying, well, how do you pray? This is it. Yeah. This is what I get a lot. Well, I said, well, how do you cut the grass? How do you wash the car? But you see, well, we don't have enough. Well, the Qur'an says you do have enough. Yes, but. So what I'm saying is, you get this from all quarters. This isn't just to do with people who don't claim to be Muslims or don't identify as Muslims, whatever we mean by that. So if their reason commands them this, the rejection of this actual message, or if they be a people transgressing all bounds. Again, this is an argument. Am hum qawmun taghun. Or if they are a people transgressing all bounds. You see, some people say, well, we're just made to transgress. We're built this way. This isn't our fault. You get this hugely now, especially with the sodomite agenda. God made us this way. We were built this way. This is in our DNA. This is an argument. These are very compact philosophical arguments, and as we read in Ecclesiastes, there was nothing new under the sun. All the stuff we have today, we've already had before. The next one, or if they say he has invented it. So we've got three arguments here, right? The first one is they're claiming that it's their reason, it's their logic. That's why they don't accept the Qur'an. The second is because they say, well, we're a people transgressing all bounds. We're just meant to transgress. We're built to transgress. It's God's fault. And the third is, or if they say he has invented it, and yakuluna taqawwalahu. If they say he has invented it, if they say he's made it up, these are three arguments. Bal. Now, often bal is a refutation of whatever's come before. And you see it often translated as rather or nay, or I sometimes render it as the truth is. You're coming back with a sort of a counter-argument. The truth is, they do not believe. Now, belief is not... being, whether one is believer or not believer, it's a condition of soul. It's not like something you aspire to. It's more like having green eyes or blue eyes. Excuse me. Why it is that one man believes and another man doesn't believe, I don't know. I don't have access to that sort of information. But I do know that people have a different spiritual DNA structure. I just observe it, and you will see it too in your life. It's just a fact. We see this. We observe this. And if we look at the early verses of Al-Baqarah, we have a definition of people who don't believe. And it says, خَتَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ وَعَلَىٰ سَمِعِهِمْ وَعَلَىٰ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَغِشَاوَةً. And we're given this, God has covered over, He's covered over our hearts, our hearing and our eyes. And we do not, and those people, they do not believe. It's a condition of soul. It's not it's not like an identity. It's not like being a Manchester United supporter. Although I will fully admit, excuse me, that religion is reduced to that. Certainly now in the West, where really it's just a matter of cultural manipulation. You can see the chess game being playing the Muslims against the racists against it's just chess. I mean, it's just. But I'm talking here about what the Qur'an actually says, rather than this rather silly game. So that's the answer. If these three kind of responses or causes for rejection are advanced, the first is that they claim that their reason is what prevents them from following the Qur'an. The second is that they are actually made to transgress. Am hum qawmun taghun. If they are a people transgressing, if that's their argument. And the third one is if they say he has invented it, the truth is they do not believe. That's the actual truth. That's the actual answer. This isn't an insult. It's just so that you know, as you go through this life. Excuse me, I'm actually not very well. If you go through this life, you'll see that you're kind of butting heads with the same kinds of situations, and and often if you try to use reason and you're not getting very far with it, excuse me, well, the actual answer is that they don't believe. God has covered their hearts, their seeing, their hearing. They're blinded. This isn't an insult. This isn't some sort of put down. It's just a fact. Like, you know what? They got green eyes. Why this is how it works, I don't know. So please don't write and ask me, because I haven't got an answer for you. If I get one, I'll let you know. But at the moment, I don't. 34. And let them produce a narrative, the like thereof, if they be truthful. Now, here's the one. And interestingly, فَلْيَأْتُوا بِحَدِيثٍ مِثْلِهِ إِن كَانُوا صَادِقِينَ. So let them bring a hadith, like the like thereof, if they be truthful. Well, they can't. And in a moment, we'll get into people who really, really can't. But even within the religious, so-called religious fraternity community, they can't either. And they've really tried. If you look at what the traditionalist, I'm not here to bash the traditionalist, incidentally. The only reason I have to critique him is because he claims monopoly rights over a book which itself claims to be complete and for all mankind. And he acts essentially as a gatekeeper against that book. And that fact means that I have to critique him. I don't actually have any more interest in the traditionalists than I do in the Mormons, or in the Jehovah's Witness, or in the Pentecostals, or in the Hare Krishnas. I really, really don't. But they're not standing there preventing people from having access to the Qur'an. So I do have to kind of critique him. Having said that, I fully accept that there are decent, righteous, good traditionalist Muslims. I completely accept that, as I do that there are in other communities. But I'm really taking an extreme position in order to make a point which needs to be made, because there isn't time to mess about anymore. And just while we're on the subject, what the traditionalist tends to do is say you have no right to critique him in any sense until you've been through his entire university process. Well, I think in mathematics you don't really need to continue if you can see that the basic postulates, like the Euclidean basics, are incorrect. If you see that somebody's starting off with 2 + 2 is 5, it doesn't matter how amazing and complicated and convoluted his later working out may be, it's going to be wrong. You can just see that. Well, that's really where I am with him. I have studied the traditionalist position, and I don't find it convincing. It does work, I suppose, as a way of approaching this. But the idea that somehow all intelligent thinking on the Qur'an is over and closed with the 4 madhabs is just ludicrous, and actually antithetical to the book which they claim as their foundational scripture. So that's really where I am with it. I'm not saying all traditionalist Muslims are bad people, because I don't believe that. In fact, I know it's not the case, because I've met some very decent ones. But decency isn't really what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is, in my opinion, is due diligence and intellectual thoroughness. Now, if they claim that they've done that for themselves, good on them. But they haven't done it for me, because I read what they've got, and it's not good enough. It just, wouldn't convince me. And I didn't personally come to the traditionalists' religion think, what, that's a great thing. I'm going to grow a beard and get sort of walk up and down, getting really hot and huffy, and feeling everything's terrible around me and all the rest of it, and go through 5 different things that I've got to do, and now I'm righteous. That wasn't it. I read the Qur'an, and then I encountered his religion, and that was the point at which I thought, you haven't got it. I have a literature degree. I'm used to reading books for myself, and just again a slight sort of digression. When my degree was in Russian language and literature, I remember reading the 4 big tomes of Dostoevsky, and I read them all, and I read them pretty thoroughly. And I can remember a novel, at least for a month or so. When I went into the lectures, I didn't recognize the books I just read on the basis of the lecturer's description of them. I'd read those books. What he was talking about was a completely different narrative. His narrative came from the critical works written about those books. I don't think he'd probably read them for 20, 30 years. I'd just read them. They were very fresh in my mind. So, I have a training in this. So when I read the Qur'an, it was a similar process. I read that narrative. I can hold that narrative in my head. Then I read what the traditionalists said about it, and I thought, you're talking about another narrative. You're talking about a book that I haven't read. And so, I just treated the book on its own terms, and came to a point where I realized this is actually correct. I didn't sort of start off thinking that it must be. But over a period of time, I realized that it was, but the narratives written about it are not. If they had been, I wouldn't be here. But they're really not. Certainly not to my satisfaction. If they are to yours, you're welcome to it. Okay, so now we're just going to move on a bit further. I don't want to do tons and tons of this because I don't think people have got the patience for it. But the next verse is, verse 35. Well, let's go back to verse 34. And let them produce a narrative, the like thereof, if they be truthful. And remember here, the word for narrative is ḥādīth, which is an interesting choice of words at the very least. Now, the next one is very interesting. Well, they're all interesting. 35. Am khuluqu min ghayri shay'in. If they be created from nothing. This is a philosophical position, and we get this if people like Lawrence Krauss. He stands up, he's paid, he's he's supported by the system. You can get support in the system to stand up and argue that we were created from nothing, but this is a philosophical position. And I'm sure Lawrence Krauss thinks he's very intelligent and very amazing, and the people who listen to him will and ah and ooh and etc. over his intellectual gymnastics. But this is a position, this is an intellectual position, and it's not new. If they be created of nothing, if that's what they're claiming, the next one, am humul khaliqun, or if they be the creators, this is another intellectual position. You get this with people like the Christian scientists. Is that right? Christian scientists, yeah. It's all in your mind. You get it with this silly, usually female philosophy, which is the universe cares about you. The universe is looking after you. You're creating your own reality, and this reality in you, you're one, and all the rest of this nonsense. I mean, there must be a computer program which you can actually generate, by which you can generate this kind of pablum. Usually, it's for those women who kind of moved away from Mills and Boon, moved into this similarly fatuous twaddle. But it gets people, and I guess there must be a sort of, I suppose there is a masculine, a male version of it. I don't know, can't think what it might be, but the secret, this sort of thing, there is nothing new. People think all this stuff's new, it's nothing new. But this is, so if they be the creators, if you're creating your own reality, so let's just go through these. If they be created of nothing, and this is a philosophical position, people hold this position, we came from nothing, we go to nothing. The second one, or if they be the creators. So if this is your argument, you created your reality. Third, or if they created the heavens and the earth. So you see, this again might actually be closer to the Christian Scientist position. We created our entire reality. It's all just inside your mind. You're projecting it out into the universe, and that's why it's all there. Okay, and then it's got the answer. Bal. Again, this refutation, this correction, this sort of setting right a statement. The truth is, they are not certain. There you are. That's the answer. They don't know. They really don't know. They're not certain. That's the answer. So you meet these people. The Qur'an is giving us all of this stuff. Unfortunately, the traditionalist sort of wraps up his presentation of the Qur'an inside a sort of shell game of a historical narrative concocted 200 years later, and he doesn't go to this book for its philosophical answers, but it has the philosophical answers. People just don't look for them, or they don't do their due diligence on it. They get swept away, which is very common, and it happened to me. So it's not in Islam, but I come from a Christian background. People get swept away by the religion about a messenger or a prophet, rather than really kind of concentrating on the religion, if you want to use that word, of the messenger or the prophet. And Christianity does this, and as people who know my channel know, I had an experience like this when I was a much younger man, sort of 18, 19, something like this, and I just swore I wasn't going to do it again. I wasn't going to let that happen to me again. I mean, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, that's shame on me. Well, I'm not up for it. And it's not, if I'd found that the Qur'an was not correct, I'd have dropped it. I'd be doing something else. But I kept with it, and I kept analysing it, and it kept beating me. And that's why I'm still here. So anyway, but not on the basis of the religion that is conflated with this book. Here's the next argument, and you hear this a lot. Verse 37, if the treasuries of thy Lord be with them. So if that's what they're claiming, you know what? We have the treasuries of God. We can make God do what we want. We can get these things, you just attract it into your life. You get all of this in a very dumbed down version for today. But people like to think that they're not religious, or they like to think they don't really have a philosophy, but they do have a religion, and they definitely have a philosophy. They just often don't understand that that's what it is. And they'll attack you as so who's religious, as though you're unreasonable. Again, going back to if their reason has if their reason has commands them this, but they are in a deen, to use the Quranic terminology. They have a doctrine every bit as much as you do, but they can't produce a hadith, the like thereof. They cannot produce anything. Going back to the Lawrence Krauss thing and the Richard Dawkins thing, they have a narrative. That the whole universe came from nothing, and that's really what they say. I mean, fundamentally, if you go down to the building blocks of it, the Big Bang Theory, which is completely tied up with the whole heliocentric gravity religion. It is a religion, there's no question about it. And this evolution with enough time and enough space and enough things that you can't prove and enough assumed conclusions. Sure, they have a story, but where is their story? Their story, it's a comic book. It's actually rehashed. If you read pre-Socratic philosophies, as much as we haven't got an awful lot of information about some of them, but they believed things which, quite frankly, are pretty, on a par with what we're told to believe with the sort of religious orthodoxy of today. Stuff like evolution, macroevolution I'm talking about. So, if they created the heavens and the earth, the truth is they're not certain. The next, if the treasuries of thy Lord be with them. And again, you get this with The Secret, you get this with certain sort of positive thinking philosophies. Or if they be the overseers. This is a quite an interesting one as well. Musaytirun. It's related to the word to write, to inscribe. It's an overseer, but it's somebody who's almost like an accountant, somebody who's keeping stock, who allows something into, out of, and is keeping that account. So, this is like a controller. If that's what they're claiming, well, this is what people claim. This is what religions claim. This is what, let's keep it broad. It's not just the Islamic religion. Any religion, the whole priesthood syndrome, that's exactly what they claim. That if if you keep sweet with the priest, then he's going to see you right. Well, that's a claim, but we have an answer to this. Again, this is the third one. Yes, if they have the treasuries, if they be the overseers, or if they have a stairway on which they can listen in. So 3 different philosophical claims, very, very terse, very condensed, completely lost by the traditionalist, but really important. Then let their listener come with a clear warrant. So there you have it. Bring your proof, bring your evidence. And to take the traditionalist, he brings his evidence. His evidence is the hadith. Well, I'm not convinced. And certainly is it fundamentally contradicts the book he claims is his foundational scripture. I'm not remotely impressed. Take the Christians. They have some evidence. Some of it seems to hang together. Some of it is completely contradictory. That's why they're, fighting and arguing. And you've got, I think it's 30,000 different sects just in America. Those will just be Protestant sects. It's ridiculous. Next one, verse 39. If he have daughters when you have sons, or if you ask of them a reward, or if thou ask of them a reward, it's addressed in the personal to Muhammad, then are they encumbered by liability. Now, again, this is missed, but the first point is, if the claim is that God has daughters when you have sons, so let's just hold that one in your mind. That's one claim. And just as an aside, you can compare and contrast this with the Quranic motif of killing the daughters because they wanted sons. You can see where the moral justification for that came. But that's the first point. If the claim is that God has daughters whereas we have sons, the second is, if thou ask of them a reward, if that's the claim, they're saying, oh, well, he's asking a reward for this. The answer is, then are they encumbered by liability? I.e., firstly, you should be having daughters as God has daughters, and secondly, you should be giving this man a reward. It's a very terse, a very tight argument. It's not, the sort of oceanic discourse. These things are absolutely they're titanium bullets. Moves on to the next one, verse 41. If they have the unseen, and you get people who say, oh well, we have access to the unseen, then are they writing? The answer is, well, this is an implication. If you have access to the unseen, then you must be writing it down. So let's see it. That's the elliptical implication here. 42. Or if they intend a plan, they've got some special plan that they're going to do, then are those who are indifferent to warning those caught in a plan, or the unbelievers are those caught in a plan. That's the answer. There's no way out of it for them. And this is why I really wanted to bring this up rather than go on about the whole COVID-19 thing. They have a plan. They plan. And God plans. And God is the best of planners. So if they have a plan, if they've got some special plan, well, then are they, if they are unbelievers, they are caught in a plan. This is your answer. These are the titanium bullets. 43. If they have a God other than God, if that's their answer, and you get this from Christians as well, they say, oh well, the God of the Qur'an, he's not really God. The answer: glory be unto God above that to which they ascribe a partnership. And if they were to see pieces of the sky falling, they would say, clouds heaped up. So these people, you can't argue with them. There's a point at which you just have to walk away. Then leave thou them until they meet their day, in which they will be thunderstruck, a day in which their planning will avail them nothing, and they will not be helped. And for those who do wrong is a punishment besides that, i.e. in this life, but most of them know not. And be thou patient for the judgment of thy Lord, for thou art before our eyes. And give thou glory with the praise of thy Lord when thou risest, and some of the night glorify thou him, and at the retreat of the stars. So this is the solution. It's drawing close to God. there's nothing. They haven't got anything. They haven't really got any answers. These answers are given to us in the form of these, what I would call titanium bullets within the Qur'an. They're not long and discursive. They're short and compact. They're the sorts of things that people can remember. They're bullet points. Unfortunately, because the traditionalist didn't do his due diligence on the text and was sidetracked, as I was in my first experience with religion within Christian traditions, into a whole narrative about something else and over the hills and far away, he's missed this. But this is in the Qur'an. This is not, this is not some, bizarre esoteric derivation that I've managed to achieve. It's just by a process of consistent application. I thought you might find this interesting, especially at this time where I think people are beginning to realize that there's a philosophical, a spiritual, but a philosophical, I use the word furqan, kind of almost like a wedge, a division, being cleaving society into two parts. And this is, I think, a natural process given where we're going. But it's good to have some answers, just so that you're not banging your head against a brick wall, because it can feel as though one is, as things go forward. So the Qur'an provides us with these answers. We have them, we can use them, we can review them, we can learn them, and we can understand the time that we're living in, because you won't be able to answer and argue with a lot of people. They have their responses, and you can go through this checklist of stuff, and when you get to the end of it, then you just turn away from them, because there isn't anything, and they should wait for their day. What is it they're bringing? Just ask yourself, what are you bringing that's better than the Qur'an? What are you bringing? Let me see it. They haven't got anything. They've got comic books, they've got NASA CGI, they've got some Hollywood stories. Hollywood producers die every day, David Rockefeller, his 6 heart transplants didn't save him. He planned, but he was caught in a plan. And so with everybody. And just make sure you're on the right side of it. That's it. That's what I wanted to share for today. I hope everyone's well, and that's all for now. If you're listening on YouTube, you can download my full translation of the Qur'an free using the button in the top right-hand corner, or buy the hard copy there at 10% less than on Amazon. I also encourage you to sign up for the Qur'anite Plus newsletter on the site to get occasional micro updates. You can download the audio from my YouTube videos to your mobile device using the links in the drop-down below. I recommend meetquranites.com to connect with other Qur'an-alone believers. Like if you like, comment if you have something constructive to say, and subscribe to get more each week. And use the link in the drop-down below to donate if you would like to help me keep doing this. And remember, this life is short, eternity is long. If you want good trees, plant good seeds.